Be'etzem, we're up to the second Maamar, but we're just going to do a recap on the first one, and there was a special request also to explain something in the first page. The last line of page Beis in the original print, that would be page valid on that one. When he talks about Tainug, the last three lines, he says, I will ein ze inyan agilui be'emes, adarabba hu bechinas aliyah v'reimemus yoysa ba'atzmis. Kein Tainug kazeh, dafka b'misha merumim be'etzem. Be'etzem ubizman tachlis hareimus shaloi, kamei hamelech betachlis hareimus shaloi, shemis'anig b'tainug poshet v'atzmi, loy me'eze dava. Ki im be'etzem reimemus atzmi. That was what you wanted to ask about. Okay, so I remember talking, I think it was in Mem Daled, if I'm not mistaken, in Tishrei, one of the Sikhs, the Rebbe said, Mekocht sich in the Hemshech of Ayin Beis, and it comes to things like this, where it talks about Misanig Ba'atzmusay. So the Rebbe said, so I asked somebody on Shabbos, if the Rebbe was talking theoretically, or he asked somebody, you made Kiddush? He said, yeah, I made Kiddush. Were you Misanig Ba'atzmusay? He says, look, somebody doesn't know what I'm talking about. He says, the Rebbe said, you have to learn it in an oath that you should understand it, not just Oisius Berches Ba'ab. But the Rebbe didn't explain what it means. So we're going to try and do that. What does it mean, Misanig Ba'atzmusay? I think it's fairly simple. What's one of the main differences which he discusses here between Rotzen and Tainug? Rotzen is Meloshen Ritze, running, Merutze. He's running somewhere. Tainug is not going anywhere. Tainug is in Zich. He's being misanig in himself. From what is he being misanig? If it's a nice piece of food, or a nice niggin, or whatever it may be, so he's misanig, he's mekabel tainig from this thing. Misanig ba'atzmusa means he's not being mekabel the tainig from something else. The tainig is all within himself. Where do you have such a musig of being misanig from nothing else but from the self? So the example he gives is something which we can't really understand because we're not in the position of a king, but a king is misanig ba'atzmusay. They say one of the kings of Russia, I don't know which one, when he became king, for 3 days he didn't go to sleep. So his mother, the old queen, came in and said, whatever his name was, Michoel, go to sleep. Yeah, I haven't slept already. He says, how can you go to sleep when there's such a tremendous pleasure of sitting on this throne, doing nothing? He's just sitting on the throne, he's happy. So we don't know what this means, but this really means it's be'etzem reimemus atzmai. There's a tainig that is not from somebody else giving him something, it's from within himself, from his own etzem. That's called misanig ba'atzmus. So the definition of tainig is something that goes within, not going out, as opposed to rotzen. And the tainig is that you're not misanig ba'atzmus means you're not receiving from something else, you're receiving from self. When could that be an example? Misanig ba'atzmus of a melech. He's misanig from his own reimelis. I would have thought of a much simpler example. I don't know if it's mechuven. If somebody's life was just saved, he has a tremendous pleasure. He was just saved. What's he having pleasure from? He just ate something. He just heard a nice niggun. It's me'atzmus from the fact that he's alive. So that would be a simple example, but for some reason the Rebbe Nishrasein gives us much.
You're saying it's a taina without any other reason that you accomplished? Just a taina without an accomplishment, you're saying?
It's not negated to accomplishment. It's not negated to accomplishment. Now actually in the second chelik of Ayin Beis, in the later Maamar, when he talks about Shabbos, he says that sometimes you can be misanig from something. Let's say you completed a project, you just built yourself a building, and then afterwards the taina can go further and further up and up until you're being misanig on a higher level that's not negated to that particular thing. It's misanig ba'atzmusay. But that's already the second chelik.
So what's the
later on when he talks about Shabbos.
So what's the pshat when the Rebbe asked if the misanig ba'atzmusay by Kiddush?
Oh, that would mean that if somebody reached the highest level of Shabbos, which is usually Mincha of Shabbos, after he had the Tainug of Friday night, which is the Tainug of Gemah HaMelacha, and then he had the Tainug of Yom Shabbos, which is the Gilui of Shabbos. Then the much higher, Raiva Derivim, which is a Tainug much higher, so then he could say he's Misanig Ba'atzmusay if you reach this Tainug. But you'll find that later on in the second chelik, which Hashem you'll get there. get to the whole pilpul about Shabbos. Anyway,
The Ratzin Nichya is a lot of times not considered a Ratzin Atzmi because it's
talking about his answer.
It's deeper than that. Like maybe it has to do with Ratzin Nichya isn't actually something here.
So what are you saying?
It's not so much a time.
But I think somebody whose life was just saved would have a lot of time, no? Anyway, that was just the beginning part. Now we're getting back to the second Maamar. We're going to try and work through the second Maamar. In order to do the second Maamar, to understand what the point is that the Rebbe Nishra is going to be going on in the Hemshech for the next few Maamarim, we're going to have to recap the Ikar Nekudas of the first Maamar. What's the Ikar Nekudas of the first Maamar? So the Rebbe Nishra is talking here about Kovetz HaMislabshim Be'ivorim. Starts off, the whole first page was all about the Kesser, but that was only Hagdama. He'll go back to Ksara much later on. We're talking about Kovetz HaMislabshim Be'ivorim. So we spoke last time about this a little bit. What's the rule of Hislabshus? The rule of Hislabshus is that the Koyach, which is Mislabish in a particular Eva, they're made for each other. There's a connection pnimi. When you have, for example, Mayim in a Keli, there's absolutely no connection between the Mayim and the Keli. It just happens to be that the shape of the Keli holds the Mayim that it shouldn't flow all over the place. But there's no connection pnimi between Mayim and plastic or glass or whatever. So therefore that's not really Hislabshus. Hislabshus means that there's a connection between the Koyach and this particular Eva. For example, the Koyach Hariyah has no business in the foot, because the foot is not a Keli to it. Whereas the eye is a Keli to the Koyach Hariyah. So therefore the Koyach Hariyah is going to be mislabish, and misachid, that's one of the things he says, is going to be misachid with the Keli. Should be in Beis, yeah. Misachid. It's going to be misachid. And if you look on page Dalad on this one, which is, I don't know what one I've over there, the beginning, the top third of Amud Dalad of the old print, he says, in page Beis, he uses the expression Harihu mislabish umisgalaboy umisachid boy. So we're going to knock it down to two things. Misachid and misgala. These are the main two things that we learned in Perek Beis. What Hislabshus means, misachid and misgala. Misachid means that there's a kesher pnimi between the koyach and the keli. In this particular eva, the koyach hariyah will fit into the eye and nowhere else. And the eye is also, there has to be, since there's a Hislabshus and a Hisachdus. Thank you. Since there is a Hislabshus pnimis between the koyach and the eva, in which the koyach is being mislabish, therefore there has to be a giving in from either side. So, for example, the chelik of the goof, which is a keli to this particular koyach, has to be zach, has to be oisgeedel, that you should be able to receive the koyach. So the eye is a certain type of choyma, of goof, which is much more edel than, for example, the foot. Therefore, the eye will receive the koyach. But the same thing works the other way around. The koyach hariyah has to be mitzamtzim itself, to be mislabish in the eva hagashmi, and therefore, by doing that, he's going to become bahakshama. So the neshama beforehand had a koyach hariyah that was able to see elikus, or whatever he sees up there, ruchnias. Now that he's come inside the guf gashmi, what is he able to see? Only gashmis. His seichel of the nefesh elokis can be masig elikus, but what is he masig? Now that he's inside the guf, he's only masig gashmis. We don't understand ruchnias. We are mitzad the fact that the neshama is a nefesh elokis, so he's masig askolas elokim. Fine, but how are we masig it? All within the terms of gashmis. That's why Chassidus has so many mishalim gashmim, because that's the way we are able to afterwards be mafshit, but that's how we get to understand anything. It's all through mishalim gashmim, because the seichel now is become a seichel gashmim. So the Hisachdus requires a giving in from both sides. That's Hislabshus. That's the first point of Hislabshus. There is Hisachdus between the koyach and the guf.
That's not Ruchnish Begashmis. We say the eye Lagabe the foot means Ruchnish Begashmis. That's where the Gashmish Ruchnish is Slavish. Or
start again.
When you say that the difference between the eye and the foot, that the eye needs to be more able, therefore the eye is have care. That's not Pshat Ruchnish Begashmis.
No, that's Gashmis.
Yeah, and in the eye Gofa there's also Ruchnish Begashmis, which has the Keli for the Gashmish Ruchnish.
Okay. There's also Ruchnish Begashmis, but it doesn't really go into that. It says Ruchnish Begashmis. He uses the Lashon Ruchnish.
Yeah, he uses.
The Ruchnish Begashmis is the Keli.
Right. He uses the word Ruchnish Begashmis.
Yeah.
It's in Perek Beis you're talking about?
Yeah. Beginning of Gimel now.
3 lines in, 4 lines in.
Oh, okay. Here he's calling it Ruchnish Begashmis. Yeah, you could call it Ruchnish Begashmis. Usually, in the Frierdiker Rebbe's expression, you're correct. He says Ruchnish Begashmi. In the Frierdiker Rebbe uses a different expression usually. I think I mentioned last time, the Frierdiker Rebbe's favorites, one of his favorites is Muhus and Metzias. Muhus and Metzias. So he says there's Shtaim Shehem Arba. There's Muhus and Metzias and Metzias, and there's Metzias and Muhus, which is probably the same thing. Muhus HaMetzias would probably be here what he calls Ruchnish Begashmi. In other words, the Metzias is that it's Basa. What is it? It's Basa. The eye is Basa and the foot is Basa. But this is the Ruchnish Begashmi. In other words, the Muhus of this Metzias is the Edelkeit of this Metzias, which he calls here Ruchnish Begashmi. The Dakas Eivarim.
He doesn't compare the eye to the foot. He speaks in the eye itself.
What's that?
In every one of the Eivarim, there is a Gashmi and a Ruchnish Begashmi, which is the case to the Kech that goes into that Eivar.
Which is what?
The Kech that goes into that Eivar, which is the Gashmi Shuparuch of the Koyach. It's not comparing the eye to the foot and Gashmi.
No, it's come to the same thing. Why this Eivar, not the other Eivar? Because the Dakas and the Ruchnis of this Eivar is a Keli to the they have to match. Right. So, getting back to the point. So there is a Achdus, right? So there has to be a giving in from either side. So that's the first thing of Islabshus. There's a Kesher Pnimi, and each one gives in, and there's a Hakshama through the Islabshus. But then there's a second point which he brings in Perek Beis, that besides this Achdus, there's his Galus. That means, even when the Koyach is mislabish, and we're saying now that the Koyach Re'iyah no longer sees Ruchnis, it only sees Gashmias. The Seichel of the Nefesh Lekis no longer is maskul Ruchnis as is. It's maskul Elokus in Levushim Gashmim. It's become a Megushim Dika Seichel. Right? Nevertheless, he's Behis Galus. What does it mean he's Behis Galus? It means to say that when we say the Koyach Re'iyah, Haruchni becomes Megushim, he still remains the Elyon and the Guf remains the Tachta. It's not sure he became a Geshem. The Seichel didn't become a Geshem. It's still a Seichel Ruchni, but it's B'levushim Gashmim. It's B'hakshama. But he's still the Elyon. In other words, he's still in charge. Who's in charge over here? The Oir or the Kli? The Koyach or the Guf? The Koyach's in charge. If by any chance the Guf decides to misbehave and not be bottled to the Koyach, then we run into a problem. That's when you have the Nefesh Bahamis playing up, and he is magbi himself on the koyach which is mislabish in him. If the levush takes over, then you have a problem. That's called that the neshama is in golus and is not able to do his avodah. Right? That's what he explained barichas and thing. But what's the ikka of all these things? What's his lashon? V'ha'ikka b'chol zeh. Where's that? Ikka inim sif gimel, the first line. This is the nakuda which is negeh to the Hemshech. Amalom ikka ha'inyan bazehu, beginning of Sif Gimel, hu lefi sheha'koyches heim pnimiyim be'etzem. Hainu shehem boim b'hagbala ben ha'nefesh, ad shehem be'erech lislabish b'kedim. What does it mean pnimiyim be'etzem? If you look in the Kitzur, you have it in the clear words. כי הכוחות הם פנימיים היינו מוגבלים בעצם. So pnimim here means mugbalim. In the Perek he's going to ask the question, if the keiches are mugbalim and the nefesh be'etzem is bligvul, so how do you get keiches mugbalim inside, how do they work together? So he says, Taka, when the keiches are kol inside the nefesh, they're going to be bottled, they're not going to be a mitzias, but what is their own definition on their own? They are mugbalim be'etzem. Okay? You have to remember that. This is the main point that's going to be negated to the Hemshech. Now let's skip to Perek It is the second line. What's the marshal? The keiches are the oiris, and the ivarim are the kalim, and there's a slapshus of the keiches in the ivarim. Okay. And the rules are the same. What are the rules? The 2 points of his slapshus is achdus, which creates a hakshama in the oil, and his galus. Right? So the first thing is that he's mislabish in the oiris of mislabish in the kelim, behis slabshus, each keli has its oil. And then he says in Perek Vov that through the his slabshus, the oiris become kemuhusa kelim. That's like we had in the moshul, when the keiches come into the guf, they become bahakshama. So the oil, when it comes into the kli, becomes bahakshama, so to speak. It actually does use that expression in another place. It becomes kaviyachol bahakshama in the keli. And what's the mashal he gives? For example, when you have the oil which is supposed to be mahava. Oil can be mahava yesh mi'ayin. Why? Because oil is zavak ba'atzmusay. Oil is me'namoy, it can be mahava yesh mi'ayin. If the oil would be mahava yesh mi'ayin, how many nivroim would we have? What type of nivroim? We'd have blikvul nivroim without any hagbolim. In order to make nivroim mugbolim, you have to have kelim, and the oil is mislabish in the kli, and through that it's mahava nivroim mugbolim. Okay, so when the oil is mislabish in the kli, what does that mean? It becomes bahakshama. How do we explain hakshama in this case, in the nimshul? What's the hakshama of the oil in the kli? Huh? It becomes mugbul and becomes mitzir, it becomes behela. It says it becomes the keli is master.
Meaning you don't see the built-in.
What you see is you see the ishavas of a yesh and a mugbul. You won't see the gilu. The keli is master and he's mahava yesh miyayin.
So it's how you see the nivra and it's mugbul.
And it's mugbul. You see the nivra, yeah. But this is where he starts adding on things which we don't have in the marshal. Or maybe we do. You decide. Look at the middle of Perek Vov. Well, actually, it does say it clearly, so it's not a question. The line begins, Omnom hai slapshus hibe beginnis is galus. Shoeris misgalim bahakelim. It's about almost to the middle of the Perek Vov. Perek Vov. This is in the mashal. What is that? That the guf is bottled to the nefesh. The nefesh remains the elyon, and the guf is not the elyon. He's nichna to the elyon. The elyon is misgala. The keiches are by isgalas. Over here it means that the oiris are by isgalas, and therefore they are mei begilui, and therefore they are shoylet. So you have in the mashal we had meich shalat alalev. Here we have also yeshlem shlita memshal ala kelim umanhigim oisam. What is the manhigim oisam? So you say, well, through these kelim is going to come a gilui into biyah, and it goes on that whole second half of the thing of the Perek. Right. So far we have the 2 points that we had is achdus, which is slapshus and hakshama, and we also have isgalus, that the oiris are on top. They are the gilu in the kelim, and they are in charge, which is galus. But what's with the third point which he said in the first Maamar? This is the main nakuda. What was the main thing he said in the first Maamar? This is where we run into a problem. In the Nimshul, do we have Pnimiyim Be'etzim? Do you see anywhere in this Maamar Pnimiyim Be'etzim?
You don't later to say how there is even before the case.
First of all, in this Maamar, do you see you see that this is the point this is the bump in the road. We have a marshal, we have a nimshul, everything's fine. His achtus, slapshus, fine. We have his galas, fine. Then we have the ikka, which he said in the which page was that? Sif Gimel. That is the ikka is that the koyachas are pnimim be'etzim. In other words, the koyachas are made to measure. This koyach hariyah, is made for the ayin. The ayin is made for the koyach hariyah, and therefore they're going to come together. And he said the ikka because there is because they're pnimim be'etzim. In the nimshul, how are you going to explain pnimim be'etzim? Does he explain it? Very exact. What does he say? You see over here the 3 lines from Pedig Zayin, beginning of Pedig Zayin. Hidden this Bailel. Let's learn them 3 lines inside. Hidden this Bailel b'Moshel the Marsha koiches mislapshim beivarim she'enam be'erach zelazeh hu lefi she'hen koiches pnimiyim be'etzim v'hainu she'im rak koiches hanefesh loy oir etzem hanefesh. Maybe we should speak about it a little bit more in a second. U'mitzamtzimim li yesh be'bechines oir pnimi u'lehoven hadugmi zel amayla. And now we go into a whole pilpul about Atzilus.
The problem is that it's Eidus, not Hidus.
In other words, we're looking for the parallel in the Nimshul of Pnimim Be'etzem. And it's not straightforward. Because since Oil is merely a Hisgalus of what's in the Kav, and the Kav is a Hisgalus of Oil and Sof. So Oil and Sof is not Pnimim Be'etzem. There's no where's Pnimim Be'etzem. In other words, the way we understood and let's say before we learn this, how the oil is coming to Kelim? You take the oil, mitzamtzim, and it comes down. What's the difference between the oil of Chachma and the oil of Bina, the oil of Ches and the oil of Gvur? The Cholitz is the same oil, it's oil and soft, it's like a traffic light. You have the red light and the green light. It's just the same oil, it just depends which glass you have. The powders give such a marshal, doesn't he, right? The Maim in the Keli or the oil in the Keli, the color of the Keli makes the difference, but the oil is the same. So in Nefesh, you explained it's not like that. You said it's Pnimim Be'etzem. That means this is a koyach hariyah. It's made for the eye, not made for the leg. It won't be mislavish in the leg. It's not that they. I mean, you could understand with the Nefesh also theoretically. You could say, they wish to blew in a chayas, and it all sorted itself out. The oil that came into the eye was able to see, and the oil that came into the foot was able to walk. But it's the same oil. We said it's not like that. We say there are 10 koichas, and each one is made to measure for a certain part of the goof, and that's how it's mislavish. Pnimim be'etzem. No, if you're going to say pnimim be'etzem, we're going to have to translate that for the Maila. How are the oiris pnimim be'etzem? The oil is all the same oil, just depends on the keli, the color of the kli. So this is the beginning of the Hemshech Inyanim. Which you didn't say before, and you just said it right at the beginning. Page Sif Hey starts. We said it once. He went through the whole Page Hey, the whole Page Vav. He didn't have to repeat himself. Over here, he starts because here lies the Nekuda HaIkris of the Chiddush of Ayin Beis. As you're going to see as time goes on. He wants to be madgish that the oiras are also pnimiyim be'etzem. And he's going to prove it all the way up, even to Lifnei HaTzimtzum. That their pnimiyim be'etzem, they didn't start become pnimiyim be'etzem somewhere along the line. They started out from where the inyan of oir pnimi begins, which is even before the tzimtzum. From there it's already pnimiyim be'etzem. But in order to get there, he has to start off with a whole arichas about Atzilus. Because Atzilus tells us, here's where we see a problem. The question is Atzilus Gilui Helam Yeshmiah? And the same question is in different places. You have the same question. Is Atzilus Gilui Helam or Yeshmiah? What's the question based on? Atzilus, by definition, what does Atzilus mean? Hatzolav Hafrosha, which means it's only his galus, Gilui Helam. There's nothing new. The oil that was here, when the sun shines into the room, there's no ischadshus, there's nothing new. It's a ha'ora, it's an etzal. But we say v'chacham v'ayin timotza. What's the answer, the most simplest answer? What does he give the answer? This is what you said, that the Atzilus is Yeshmai, that's going on the Kelim. We say Gilui Helam, that's going on the oil. That makes sense. A Keli has a Hagdara, it's like Gufim, because after all we're talking about, why is the marshal of Guf masim to the Yonim Lamayla, what we say every Friday in Paschal Yod. The Kama Gufin Tikinis Loim. Kaviyachal Lamayla, there's a Guf. He brings down from the Shalah, the famous Shalah that says, we don't say it in our Nusach, but there's a Nusach, Yigdal. Have you heard of Nusach Yigdal? Yigdal Alekim Chai? You never davened in any shul besides the Baal Shul, huh? You did? So they sing Yigdal. It's a beautiful piyut. And it's quoted in Chassidus the whole time. And then it says, Ein loy demus haguf ve'ein loy guf. He doesn't have a demus of a guf, and he doesn't have a guf. That doesn't make sense. First you say he doesn't have a guf, and he doesn't even have a demus haguf. But the order is the other way around. Ein loy demus haguf. He doesn't have a demus of a guf, and also he doesn't have a guf. The order is wrong. So the Shalah asks this question. So what does the Shalah say? It depends. What do you mean by demus haguf? Demus haguf, kidnuseinu, is going on olam esbiyah. And guf, kama gufin techinas line, is going on atzilus. The kelim are called gufim. So that's why we're saying ein loy demus haguf. He doesn't have the tziyah of olam esbiyah. The ein loy guf, and he doesn't have a guf. He's not really mitzuyah in the hagbal of atzilus. So, but what are we talking about when we say guf? We're talking about the kelim. They're called the gufim. Kama gufin techinas line is talking about the spheres, the kelim of the spheres. So we've just split up kelim from oiris. Kelim have a tziyah, they have a hagdara, a hagbala, but oiris, we say ein loy guf, ein loy demus haguf. What is oir? He says oiris pshitus. So how could you possibly say on spheres that they are pnimim be'etzem? You can't. You could say on the kelim, but you can't say on the oiris. So we're stuck. If you're going to be machalik, the chacham merayin timotze is going on the kelim, and atzilus loshem netzel is going on the oiris, then we don't have any pnimim be'etzem. The oil is the same. It's netzel. It's oil pashut, and it's not. How can you say that it's pnimim be'etzem? So we're stuck over here with the pnimim be'etzem. Also, you can't say it's the oiris are pshitas. You can't say the oiris are pnimim. How do we translate the word pnimim? Mugbalim be'etzem. Can you say on the oiris of atzilus that they're mugbalim? The oiris of atzilus are ein sof la yishpashtusam. We're saying now that the keli makes it into chesed v'tiferes. The oiris pshitas. We did the traffic light, right? Huh? So
even before it even gets to the Kelim of Atzilus, it already has whatever in Kesser is already saying that even though they're the old Nichol together, but the Gaalamb is still already.
So you're asking a very good question. So that is Bemis and part of the Shiloh. Are you going to say there's no tziyah to the oil at all? What's the time Atzilus? Atzilus means it's netzal. It's only a ha'ara. Coming from where? All the way up from Oil himself. What made the change? In other words, at which point do we start saying that now there's oiris which are pnimim be'etzem? I mean, to ask what you're asking in Kesser, you can ask even before that. For example, on Akudim, the expression is Esa oiris b'kli echad. How do you get Esa oiris? Yeah, how do you get Esa oiris if it's one keli?
The question is really early.
So it goes all the way back. So when do we start having this pnimim be'etzem? So this is why he starts. And he goes into Atzilus. He explains the stira. Is it gila herem yesh mi'ayim? Right? And there's an arichas in the middle about a few other things which come in, a lot of interesting things. Say again?
The whole Hemshech is basically part of parentheses.
I wouldn't say that. But if you know, the thing is, you have to remember, in a Hemshech, this is a rule by all Hemshech, you have to hold on to the thread of what's going on. He's going to go on other inyanim in the middle, going to explain different sugars in the middle, but you have to hold on to where is he going? What is the main nakuda? Over here, the main nakuda, which we left up, you see, he doesn't answer the question. We're going to another inyan, and we're going to Atzilus, and we'll come back afterwards to where the odors start becoming pnimi and be'etzem. Okay, that's basically just you should remember this nakuda, so now when you go to the next Maamar, you'll be able to see What's that?
How far does this run through the Hemshech?
The truth is, this Nekuda of Pnimim Be'etzem and the Shoresh of it, even Lifnei HaTzimtzum, is probably all the way through. You'll find many times you will say the expression Kfi hashita hamavur b'drush zeh. See if I can find it. Kfi hashita hamavur b'drush zeh. Because we know that there's two shittas in Oirus, right? If Oirus are pshutim or Oirus have etziyah. Here he wants to emphasize that it does have etziyah, and he wants to say that it began also Lifnei HaTzimtzum. It's brought down other places, but we're going to soon see, especially in Shlach, a very big chiddush. When we get there, a big chiddush which it doesn't say anywhere. It's one of the chiddushim of Ayin Beis, which needs a shtickle hesber. But we'll get there. We can't jump ahead. So it's already, you have certain things in Samach Vov already. But in Samach Vov, one of the main differences you could say is in Samach Vov, he learns it as two different shittas and keeps it that way. He explains the same question actually if Atzilus is Gilem Yeshmi'ai, and explains according to one shitta, and then he says according to another shitta. In Ayin Beis, he the whole time sticking to one shitta, mentions occasionally the other one. He sticks to the shitta that the Oirus are Pnimim Be'etzem, the Shiurim. But every now and then, even over here somewhere, you'll find that he's metavich them. Just remember here in a bracket, there's a tibuch. Like the Ikin Chedik Beis is metavich. You know what I'm talking about when he says Pnimius and Chitzonius? That's the, what's that? There's somewhere where he's metavich it in a bracket, and he's going to talk about it later.
The whole parak is a bracket? That one? When it's the whole parak as Ayin?
That's not the other ones. It's the end of it's one of the end of the Maamorim in a bracket. Maybe it's the Zion. I seem to remember on this side of the page. I've forgotten where it is.
So this is the Nekuda of the Hemshech?
One of the main things, put it like that. Okay. Having said that, we can deal with a few points. Have we got it straight, the Perek Ches, about how the Kedim work, the Rishimu? That was okay?
What's haste okay?
Yeah, but I should have doing it.
Here's one of the places where he talks about the chibur of the kav and the rishimu. Let's maybe talk about that. Where the kelim come from? The shoresh of kelim is from the koyach hagvul, which is called the rishimu. One of the reasons it's called the rishimu is because it's a roshim that's left after the siluk of the Oren Sof. But it's not just a roshim, meaning it's just a leftover something. It's a koyach. It's a koyach of the Eibishter, just like Kshem sheyesh lekoyach the bilti bagvul, kach yesh lekoyach bigvul. The koyach habligvul is the gilu Oren Sof. The koyach hagvul is the rishimu. So when the kav comes down after the tzimtzum, what does the kav do? It does everything. It does oirus and kelim. Now, if the kav is coming from oir, what's it his business to make kelim? How did he get to making kelim? Huh? Oh, that's the vor that he was mislabish in the rishim. But dugmas and oir, which is mislabish in a kli. It's not a kli. The rishim is a koyach. It's not a keli. But the oir kav is mislabish in the rishimu, and therefore has, so to speak, absorbed the koyach hagvul. So now the kav is not just oir. I don't know the time now. Okay, yeah. The kav is not just oir. It's oir with the koyach of keli. So therefore the kav now has permission to go ahead, not just to be Michoel Oilers, but also to be Michoel Kelim. The question is going to be, so how do you extract the Kelim from the oil?
What draws the air down in the first place of the Kelim? That they can hold the air.
So again?
Draws the air down.
Saying the oil is coming, no. That's a kavona, that's another thing. The kav is being nimshach down as an oil. It has absorbed the koyach of the Rishimu because when it came down it was mislabish in the Rishimu. So it now has also the koyach of the Rishimu. How are you going to take that koyach out and make it into kelim? So what's a moshel gash, just so we should see what's going on. Where the oisius and kelim is the same thing, right? Where do oisius come from? You have oisius adibu, oisius machshava. Where do they come from? From the seichel, or they have their own source? Oisius come from the etzem hanefesh, right? So there's a shayrish for oisius and there's a shayrish for giluyim. The barak hamavrik, you see oil. Somebody, a big idea comes, you just see the oil. Or rotzen, you want something. You want to have something to eat. You want to have something to eat. In what language do you want to have it to eat? No language. It's a rotzen. At some point somebody asks you, so what do you want? You say, I want this. You're able to say it. So, but the rotzen itself, or the barak hamavrik, is an oil without oisius. So it would seem. So when do the oisius come in? When the barak hamavrik, you then take the brilliant idea and you start being mitzamtzim it, all of a sudden oisius appear. You're able to explain what your idea was. And if you don't start being mitzamtzim straight away, tachat the barak can go back and you get stuck. You don't know what you don't even know your own chiddush. You have to start again. So where the oisius is coming from? The oisius is coming from their source, from the mocha, from the etzem hanefesh. Or sometimes it says chach mitztimor, kadbas haseichel. Sometimes we say all the way up to the etzem hanefesh. So where are the oisius? How did they come down? The oil came down as a barak hamavrik or as a rotzen or a tiny, whatever it is, and now I'm being mitzamtzim that oil, and all of a sudden oisius appear. Where are they appearing from? The answer is that the oisius were inside the oil the whole time, because oil doesn't come out on its own. There's a rule, klal echad gadol, ein ochal gilui without oisius. Every gilui has oisius. Actually, it's a Maamar from this week if you want to learn it. Rabbi Akiva, Tafshin Yud Zayin from Cheshvan. Tafshin Yud Zayin, there's a Maamar, it's actually a shtickle Ayin Beis. Learn another shtickle of Chelik Gimel of Ayin Beis in the Rebbe's Maamar. Tafshin Yud Zayin. Look at that Maamar, I'll tell you. The Rebbe explains Barichas that you have oisius, even the highest giluim of the nefesh, even in Tainug, even in Ratzon, there's always oisius there. The only thing is, the oisius are kolol within the oil. They're absorbed into the oil, you don't see them. If you mitzamtzim the oil, the more tzimtzim oil, the more mitzias of oisius. The more gilui, the less oisius. It's indirectly, what's the expression? In proportionate, directly in proportionate. Yeah, as you have more oil, less oisius. Less oil, more oisius. It's actually brought down in Tanya Nahagor. You see this nekuda. So akoponim, the oisius were there. They were kolol in the oil. If you mitzamtzim in the oil, you'll see the oisius. So the same thing over here. The kav has the oisius because it was mislabish in the Rishimu. So it's like the barak hamavrik. The kav is al derech, just al derech. The barak of oil. Inside there's oisius, but you don't see them. You see oil. Now we're going to have to do something to the kav to extract from it oisius, which is kelim over here, and make eser kelim. What is that pu'ula? How does that work? That is going to be in the next Maamar. Where does he talk about this note? Where's that?
Here.
The next Maamar, yeah?
Yeah.
Perik Tes? Should be in Perik. No, it's not Perik Tes, I don't see it.
Yud, it's the beginning of Yud.
Yeah. It starts a little bit in Yud, and
then there's Yud.
And this whole business of Hisnoitzus and this whatever he's speaking about over there is all to explain how do you extract the kelim from the oil, and the nekuda being that kelim work on a different way from oil. How does one oil come from another oil? Like if I yotzal min haruach, it just netzal. You have an oil, you might sell another oil. The sun shines and you continues. Kelim are dafke bo'efen shel richuk, bo'efen shel havdalah. Their kesher with their mocker is a distant, remote kesher. Therefore, we have to extract the kelim from the oiros in a distant way. We have to make a separation between the two, and that's going to be the inyan of isnoitz. So that you'll see later on. Anyway, just to summarize what we just did in this Maamar is explaining the nimshul of Islapshus HaKeiches Beivarim. The Moshe explained by Arichas, the Islapshus has in it mainly two things, is Achdus and is Galus. And then he said in Sif Gimel, the Ikke is Pnimim Be'etzem. And now in this second Maamar he's translating it into the Nimshul. He explains his Achdus and he explains his Galus. And then in Sif Zayin he says, but what's with Pnimim Be'etzem? What are you going to do with that? In order to explain that, let's go into the whole inyan of Atzilus, where we have the Shaila, is it Gilo Helam or Yesh Mi'ayin? And when we get that straight, what's going to be the question afterwards? We're going to say that Oiris is Gilo Helam and Kelim are Yesh Mi'ayin. And then he's going to ask on that, what's going to be the question on that? What's going to be the question on that? We did a Palgin Diburi. What did we say? Kelim Yesh Mi'ayin. Oiris there Gilo Helam. What's going to be the kasha on that from the pasuk?
From where?
That the pasuk says "V'achachma ma'ati matzah." Achachma doesn't just go on keli achachma ma'ati matzah. It's also oir achachma ma'ati matzah. If oir achachma ma'ati matzah, now we run into a problem. So the oiros are also yeshman. They're also mugbalim. That's what he wants to reach, to say that the oiros are also mugbalim be'etzem, even though they're oir. And that's going to be a big chiddush. And this is going to be, we have to remember also, but this part is where the mashal and the nimshal don't exactly match. I think I mentioned this in the first year. This is one nakuda where the mashal and the nimshal don't exactly match. How do you get koiches pnimiyim be'etzem from the nefesh? Who made them pnimiyim be'etzem? What did he do? Did you make your koiches pnimiyim be'etzem? No, you're born like that. You have the etzem nefesh, and the Eibishter Kaviyachol arranged it that he was extracted from the etzem nefesh 10 inyanim, which are mugbalim be'etzem. There is another gilui from the nefesh which is not mugbal be'etzem. What would that be called? Huh? Rotzen is also considered a kayach. What is it? Chayis kloli or his spashtus hanefesh. Let's use the expression. Let's use the expression of the Maamar. His spashtus hanefesh. Look on top of page Vav, whichever that is. Towards the beginning of Sif Gimel. Yeah, he says a few lines into Peirik Gimel. He says, "V'hagam da nefesh ubilti mugman v'kolmak ma'akeches heim bebeginnes gvul sharim keches pratiim kechachma kechachezet v'hinimtzoim klulim benefesh lo shehem ha'orav ispashtus ma'anefesh atzma." They're not a spashtus nefesh. You can have from the nefesh two things. You can have a spashtus nefesh that will be like oir me'en hamor. That's not premium be'etzem. And then you have koiches, which the Eibishter arranged before you were born, that the nefesh has 10 attachments, so to speak. What I mentioned last time, the Fidik calls them a vori ha-nefesh. There's like 10 evorim to the nefesh. The esa koiches are like 10 evori ha-nefesh. So how did you get koiches pnimiyim? You didn't do anything. That's how you're created. But Lamaila, you can't say that. How did it start off from Lamaila? You have Oir and Sof. And who made it into, where did Pnimim Be'etzem? So we're going to have to think, how did that happen somewhere along the line to make Koiches Pnimim or Oiris Pnimim Be'etzem? That's where the Moshe is slightly different. We didn't do anything to make our Koiches Pnimim. Lamaila, something had to be done to make the Koiches Pnimim. We're going to find the address where they belong, where they come from, and then we're going to have to work out at some point how did they become Pnimim Be'etzem. So that's the Nakuda, the Hashvah between the Mashal and the Nimshal. And the thing that we're left with is the Pnimim Be'etzem, and that's the continuation after he deals with Atzilus. We'll get back to that about Pnimim Be'etzem. That's more or less it.
So that's Vayichan. Next Maamar is when he gets to the.
Yeah, he's going to get to it. Yeah, and Shlach is going to be the big Chiddush.